Game 1 of the 1909 World Series. The Pittsburgh Pirates, led by player-manager Fred Clark, finally unseat the Cubs as the National League champion after 3 consecutive years of Chicago winning the NL pennant. In the American League, the Detroit Tigers and manager Huey Jennings pick up their 3rd straight AL pennant after 2 consecutive losses to the Chicago Cubs in the World Series. Game 1 was played in Pittsburgh at the Pirates' brand new Forbes Field and featured the pitching matchup of George Mullen for the Tigers and the rookie Babe Adams for the Pirates. Adams was a surprise choice for the Pirates as the team featured several veteran pitchers that could be considered the staff ace, but Clark went with Adams at the suggestion of National League President John Haidler. Haidler claimed that Adams' style resembled that of the Washington Senators' Dolly Gray, who'd given the Tigers trouble all season, so the Pirates took the gamble and put the rookie on the mound for Game 1. Things started off shaky for the rookie Adams as the Tigers scored in the top of the first inning. After a walk to leadoff batter Davy Jones, Donnie Bush laid down a sacrifice bunt to move the runner to second. Ty Cobb then drew a second walk to put another runner on, but the Pirates were able to get the lead runner out at third on a ground ball back to the pitcher by Sam Crawford. The Tigers got on board when a single by Jim Delahanty scored Ty Cobb from second base. The score is 1-0 Tigers after half an inning. But this would be their only run of the game as Babe Adams settled in and cruised the rest of the way. Pirates left fielder and manager Fred Clark tied up the game with a home run in the 4th inning. One swing of the bat and the score is now 1-1. In the 5th inning, Pittsburgh's Bill Abstein reached safely on an error by Tigers second baseman Jim Delahanty and then made it all the way to third base after a second error on the play, this time by Ty Cobb. Mullen struck out the next batter, but a double by George Gibson scored Abstein for an unearned run and put the Pirates ahead 2-1. A third Tigers error, this time by shortstop Donnie Bush, allowed pitcher Babe Adams to reach safely and sent Gibson to third. Mullen hit Bobby Byrne with a pitch to load the bases. Tommy Leach, another Pittsburgh veteran of the first World Series, lofted a sacrifice fly to left field to bring home Gibson and make the score 3-1 Pirates. Pittsburgh rallied for another run in the 6th inning. Hannes Wagner led off the inning with a double to left field. The Hall of Fame shortstop was caught off base on a pickoff move by Tigers catcher Boss Schmidt, but the throw went stray for an error, and Wagner ended up on third base. After the next batter popped out foul, Bill Abstein hit a soft ground ball and was thrown out at first by catcher Schmidt, but Wagner scored on the play to make it 4-1 Pirates. The rally continued when Chief Wilson got on base with a single, and a passed ball by the unfortunate Boss Schmidt moved Wilson to second, but Mullen got George Gibson to fly out to left to end the inning. The final score of the game was 4-1 Pittsburgh. 4 costly fielding errors by the Detroit Tigers cost them 2 unearned runs. The Pirates rookie pitcher Babe Adams going the distance, allowing only the 1 run in the first inning on 6 hits, 2 strikeouts, and 4 walks as the Pirates take the lead in the series 1-0. Game 2 of the 1909 World Series between the Detroit Tigers and the Pittsburgh Pirates. The second game of the series took place at Pittsburgh's Forbes Field, and the pitching matchup for the day was Wild Bill Donovan for the Tigers and Howie Kamnitz for the Pirates. Kamnitz was perhaps a questionable choice on this day as the Pirate pitcher had been recovering from an episode of tonsillitis. The Pirates took the lead in the first inning. Bobby Byrne opened the game with a walk and promptly scored on a double by Tommy Leach. Fred Clark laid down a sacrifice bunt to move Leach to third. After Hannes Wagner struck out, Dots Miller hit a ground rule double to score Leach, making the score 2-0 Pirates. The Tigers came back with a couple runs of their own in the second inning. George Moriarty and Tom Jones hit consecutive singles to left field to put runners on the corners. Catcher Boss Schmidt came through with a double to drive in both runners and even the score up at 2-2. In the Tigers' half of the third, a Davy Jones bunt led to an error by Bill Abstein, leaving Jones safe at first. Donnie Bush followed with a single, and Ty Cobb drew a walk to load the bases with no one out. Sam Crawford flew out to left for the first out of the inning, then a single by Jim Delahanty scored both runners to put Detroit up 4-2. Delahanty and Cobb ended up safe at second and third on the throw to third base. That was it for Howie Kamnitz for the day, and the veteran Vic Willis was brought in to pitch. Ty Cobb then successfully stole home plate to make the score 5-2 Tigers. The Tigers rallied again in the 5th when a double by Sam Crawford and a walk to Jim Delahanty put 2 runners on. After getting the next batter to pop up, Willis walked Tom Jones to load the bases. Boss Schmidt drove a single to center field to score Crawford and Delahanty, but Tom Jones was thrown out trying to take third base on the play. And that was the last run scored as the Tigers took the game 7-2. Wild Bill Donovan with a nice pitching performance for Detroit, giving up only 2 runs on 5 hits with 7 strikeouts and 2 walks, while the Pirates' Kamnitz was blown away after only 2 1/3 innings. We head to games 3 and 4 in Detroit with the series tied at 1 game apiece. Game 3 of the 1909 World Series between the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Detroit Tigers. The third game saw the series move to Bennett Park in Detroit with the series tied at 1 game apiece. On the mound for Game 3 was Nick Maddox for the Pirates and Ed Summers for the Tigers. The Pirates kicked off the game with a rally in the top of the first inning. Bobby Byrne got on base with a bunt single, and another base hit by Tommy Leach put runners on the corners. Fred Clark grounded to the pitcher for a fielder's choice, and Bobby Byrne was out at the plate trying to score. Runners were again left at the corners with one out. A ground ball by Hannes Wagner led to an error by Tigers shortstop Donnie Bush, which allowed 2 runs to score, leaving Wagner safe at first base. Hannes Wagner swiped second base, and an error on the throw by catcher Boss Schmidt allowed Wagner to go all the way to third. Ed Summers then uncorked a wild pitch, which scored Wagner. Summers' control issues continued as he walked Dots Miller. A base hit by Bill Abstein led to another error, this time by outfielder Sam Crawford on the throw to third, which allowed Miller to score and Abstein to take third base. Ed Willett was then brought on in relief of Ed Summers after only 1/3 of an inning pitched. A single by Chief Wilson scored Abstein from third base, making the score 5-0 Pirates. Willett got the next 2 batters out to end the inning, but the damage was done after a disastrous first featuring 3 fielding errors. Pitching woes for the Tigers continued into the second inning as Tommy Leach and Fred Clark were both hit by pitches with 1 out. A Hannes Wagner ground ball to short led to the out at second base, putting runners on the corners with 2 out. Tommy Leach then boldly attempted a steal of home and ended up safe on an error on the throw by Ed Willett to the plate. The score was 6-0 Pirates at the end of the inning. Seventh inning brought some hope for the Tigers as they managed to get within 2 runs. Jim Delahanty led off with a double to center field. The Pirates then made an error of their own to give the Tigers a break as George Moriarty reached safely on an error on the catch at first by Bill Abstein. With runners on the corners, a Tom Jones single brought Delahanty home and put Moriarty at second base. After Boss Schmidt popped foul to third and Matty McIntyre, pinch hitting Fred Willett, struck out, Davy Jones bunted safely for a single to load the bases with 2 outs. Donnie Bush followed with a single to score both Moriarty and Tom Jones and leave Davy Jones at second. Ty Cobb followed with a third consecutive single to score Davy Jones from second, making the score 6-4 Pirates. Ralph Works was brought in to pitch for the Tigers, relieving Willett for the remainder of the game. There was more offense by the Pirates in the 9th inning when Bobby Byrne got on base with a 1-out single to center field. A ground rule double by Tommy Leach put runners on the corners, and Fred Clark sent a sacrifice fly to right to score Bobby Byrne and bring Tommy Leach to third base. Hannes Wagner brought home the final Pittsburgh run of the game with a base hit to score Leach, making the score 8-4 Pirates. The Tigers rallied again in the bottom of the 9th. Davy Jones grounded to the shortstop with 1 out, but ended up safe on another error by Bill Abstein at the catch at first base. A single by Donnie Bush put runners at first and second, and another ground rule double, this time by Ty Cobb, scored Davy Jones and put Donnie Bush at third. Bush came home on a ground out to short by Sam Crawford to make the score 8-6 Pittsburgh, but they could not recoup the last 2 runs. The Tigers lose by 2 runs in a relatively high-scoring game with 5 messy errors by the Tigers alone. Pittsburgh now leads the series 2-1. Game 4 of the 1909 World Series between the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Detroit Tigers. The 4th game finds us back at Bennett Park in Detroit, with the Pirates leading the series 2-1. The pitching matchup for the game was George Mullen for the Tigers versus Lefty Leafield for the Pirates. In the Tigers' half of the second, Jim Delahanty got on board when he was hit by a pitch. A single by George Moriarty put runners on the corners with nobody out. Tom Jones grounded into a fielder's choice to the pitcher, and Delahanty was caught at home, leaving runners on second and third with 1 out. A single by Tigers catcher Oscar Stainage brought home both runners to make the score 2-0 Tigers. The Tigers rallied again in the 4th inning. Tom Jones got on base with a bunt single, but Oscar Stainage followed by grounding into a double play, leaving the Tigers with 2 out and nobody on. George Mullen drew a walk, and Davy Jones came through with a base hit to put runners on first and second. Tiger shortstop Donnie Bush brought home 1 run with a ground rule double, which brought Davy Jones to third. A second consecutive ground rule double, this time by Ty Cobb, brought home 2 more runs to make the score 5-0 Tigers. The Tigers wore out Lefty Leafield after 4 innings and 5 earned runs as the pitcher was pulled for a pinch hitter in the 5th. On the mound for the Pirates in the bottom half of the inning was veteran and World Series hero Deacon Phillippe. Phillippe had pitched the bulk of the innings in the very first World Series in 1903 for Pittsburgh against the Boston Americans. The veteran right-hander got in trouble in the 8th inning when George Moriarty got on base with a single, and Tom Jones reached safely on an error by Phillippe himself. Davy Jones walked with 2 outs to load the bases, but Phillippe got out of the jam by coaxing a ground out from Donnie Bush. George Mullen completed the 5-hit shutout with only 2 walks and 10 strikeouts, and the Tigers won by a score of 5-0. The series is now tied at 2 games apiece as we head back to Pittsburgh for Game 5. Game 5 of the 1909 World Series between the Detroit Tigers and the Pittsburgh Pirates. With the series tied at 2 games apiece, we return to Forbes Field in Pittsburgh for a tie-breaking game featuring the pitching matchup of Ed Summers for the Tigers and Babe Adams for the Pirates. The Tigers open the game in an explosive style with a leadoff home run by Davy Jones. The score is already 1-0 Tigers after 1 batter. In the Pirates half of the first 2 batters reached on a base hit by Bobby Byrne, followed by a bunt single by Tommy Leach. Fred Clark laid down a bunt to move both runners forward, and Hannes Wagner was given an intentional pass to load the bases. Ed Summers struck out Dots Miller for the second out, but issued a bases-loaded walk to Bill Abstein to score the tying run for the Pirates. Summers was able to strike out the next batter to get out of the inning with only 1 run scored. The Pirates opened the second inning with a base hit by their catcher, George Gibson. Babe Adams moved the runner to second with a sacrifice bunt, and then Gibson moved to third on a groundout by Bobby Byrne. Burn. With a runner in scoring position, Ed Summers let loose a wild pitch, which scored Gibson, giving the Pirates a lead of 2-1. In the third inning, the Pirates got a pair of runners on when Fred Clark drew a walk and a Hannes Wagner single put runners on the corners. Dots Miller grounded out, but both runners advanced, and Wagner scored to boost the Pirates' lead to 3-1. The Tigers came back in the sixth with a one-out rally. Ty Cobb reached safely with a base hit and came home on a double by Sam Crawford. Jim Delahanty hit a ground ball to the shortstop, but Hannes Wagner made an error on the throw, and Sam Crawford scored to tie the game at 3 runs each. The Pirates' biggest rally came in the seventh inning. With one out, Bobby Byrne and Tommy Leach again got on base with consecutive singles to put runners on the corners. Left fielder and manager Fred Clark followed with a 3-run home run, his second of the series, to make the score 6-3 Pittsburgh. Ed Summers hit Hannes Wagner with a pitch before recording the second out of the inning. Wagner then proceeded to steal second, and then third base, and was able to come all the way home for a run when Tigers catcher Boss Schmidt made an error on the play. Schmidt had come in the game as a defensive replacement to start the inning. The score was now 7-3 Pittsburgh. The Tigers put another run on the board in the eighth with a solo home run by Sam Crawford to make the score 7-4 Pirates. In the Pirates' half of the eighth, Chief Wilson got on base with a double and then scored on a single by George Gibson to make the score 8-4 Pittsburgh. And this was the final tally as the Pirates took the lead in the series 3-2. Ed Willett came on in relief of Ed Summers for the remainder of the game. Babe Adams picking up his second win of the series for the Pirates, spreading out 4 runs and 6 hits with only 1 walk and 8 strikeouts. We head to Detroit for Game 6 with the Pirates 1 game away from winning the series. Game 6 of the 1909 World Series between the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Detroit Tigers. The series returns to Bennett Park in Detroit with the Pirates leading the series 3-2. On the mound for the 6th game are Vic Willis for the Pirates and George Mullen for the Tigers. The Pirates got a quick lead in the top of the first. The first 2 batters, Bobby Byrne and Tommy Leach, got on base with a pair of singles to put runners on the corners. Fred Clark followed with another base hit to score Byrne and bring Leach to third, with Clark advancing to second on the throw home. Hannes Wagner delivered the 4th consecutive Pirates hit as he doubled to drive in both base runners, making the score 3-0 Pirates. George Mullen was able to get the next 3 batters out to end the frame. The Tigers answered in their half of the first when Donnie Bush took a base on balls and scored on a double by Sam Crawford to make the score 3-1 Pirates. Crawford walked to lead off the 4th inning for the Tigers. A single by Jim Delahanty put runners on the corners. George Moriarty followed with another base hit to drive in Crawford, but Delahanty was thrown out trying to take third base. We're left with Moriarty on second base with 1 out. Tom Jones delivered a 3rd consecutive Tigers base hit to score Moriarty and tie the game up at 3-3. Jones advanced to second on an error on the play by Fred Clark, and Vic Willis walked the next batter to put a second runner on, but the veteran was able to get the next 2 batters out and end the inning tied at 3. In the 5th inning, Donnie Bush got on base for the Tigers again with a single. This time the double to bring home Bush came off the bat of Jim Delahanty to make the score 4-3 Tigers. Howie Kamnitz was brought on in relief of Vic Willis for the Pirates in the 6th inning. The Tigers continued to give the Pirate pitchers trouble when Boss Schmidt led off the 6th with a ground rule double. The momentum was almost squashed when George Mullen grounded into a fielder's choice for an out at third base, and Davy Jones erased that runner with a ground ball for a force at second, leaving a runner on first with 2 outs. Davy Jones stole second base, and then Donnie Bush drew a walk to put 2 runners on for Ty Cobb. Cobb hit the second ground rule double of the inning to score Davy Jones from second base and make the score 5-3 Tigers. The Pirates pinch hit for the pitcher Kamnitz in the top of the 7th and brought on World Series veteran Deacon Philippi for the bottom half of the inning. Pittsburgh made a last effort in the 9th inning when Dots Miller and Bill Abstein led off with back-to-back base hits to put runners on first and second. Chief Wilson laid down a bunt, and an error on the play by Tom Jones led to Dots Miller scoring from second and put runners on the corners with nobody out. The base runner, Miller, had collided with the Tigers' first baseman Tom Jones on the play, perhaps causing the error, and Jones was taken out of the game due to injury. The Tigers shuffled their defense as Sam Crawford came in from the outfield to play first, Davy Jones shifted to center field, and Matty McIntyre came in to play left. Crawford got involved immediately as George Gibson grounded one to first. Bill Abstein broke for home from third base on contact and was an easy target for Crawford as he came to the plate. The Pirates were down by 1 run with runners on first and second and 1 out. Ed Abaticchio was brought in to pinch hit for the pitcher Philippi, but George Mullen struck out the pinch hitter and Boss Schmidt fired to third base to catch Chief Wilson stealing for a game-ending double play. The Tigers win the game 5-4 and tie the series at 3 games apiece to force the first ever winner-take-all Game 7 in World Series history. Game 7 of the 1909 World Series between the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Detroit Tigers. With the series tied at 3 games apiece, this winner-take-all game was played at Bennett Park in Detroit, with Babe Adams on the mound for the 3rd time for the Pirates and Wild Bill Donovan pitching for the Tigers. The game began with Donovan hitting Pittsburgh's third baseman Bobby Byrne with a pitch. Byrne would be caught stealing in the inning and then was removed for a defensive replacement in the bottom half of the first due to injury. Tommy Leach moved in to play third base, and Ham Hyatt replaced Leach in center field for the remainder of the game. Donovan's control issues continued into the 2nd inning. Bill Abstein led off with a walk and then stole second base. Chief Wilson bunted into a fielder's choice, but both runners were safe at the corners. After George Gibson popped up for the first out, Babe Adams was put on with a walk to load the bases. Defensive replacement Ham Hyatt lifted a sacrifice sacrifice fly to score Epstein, and then Tommy Leach drew a walk to load the bases once again. Fred Clark drew another walk off of Bill Donovan to drive in the second run of the inning. The score is 2-0 Pittsburgh. The Tigers brought in George Mullen, another pitcher, to pinch hit for Donovan in the second, and Mullen would stand to pitch the remainder of the game. In the fourth, Mullen issued a one-out walk to Ham Hyatt and then gave up a single to Tommy Leach to put runners on first and second. Fred Clark laid down a sacrifice bunt, and both runners advanced, and then Hannes Wagner was given the intentional pass to load the bases. Dots Miller connected with a single to score 2 more runs for the Pirates and make the score 4-0 Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh rallied again in the sixth when Tommy Leach got on second with a ground rule double, and Fred Clark followed with a walk to put 2 on. The legendary Hannes Wagner squared up a 2-run triple and then scored himself on an error on the play by Tigers outfielder Davy Jones to make the score 7-0 Pittsburgh. Things looked even more grim for the Tigers in the 8th inning. Fred Clark was issued a one-out walk and stole second base. After Wagner flied to center for the second out, a Dots Miller fly ball was dropped for an error by Sam Crawford, and Fred Clark scored an unearned run. This was the final run as Pittsburgh took Game 7 in an 8-0 shutout. Babe Adams with his third win in this back-and-forth 7-game series. A standout performance from the young pitcher with a 1.33 ERA over 27 innings for the Pirates. The Pittsburgh Pirates are the world's champions of 1909 as the Detroit Tigers drop their third straight championship opportunity.